Take a good look at these scenes because you'll never see anything like them in a modern cinema again. Today, Hollywood is scared. They're scared of grit. We live in an era of safety warnings and sensitivity readers. But we remember a different time. We remember the 1970s and 80s, the decades of incorrect cinema. Films where the heroes didn't apologize, where the jokes were sharp, and where the action was bone-breakingly real. If these 10 masterpieces were pitched to a studio executive today, they'd be tossed in the trash before the first page was read. Today, we're counting down 10 legendary movies that the modern world just can't handle. These are the films they'd love to ban, but they live forever in our collections. Number 10. Blazing Saddles, 1974. The comedy they killed. We start with the ultimate forbidden fruit of Hollywood comedy. If you want to see a modern studio executive break out in a cold sweat, just show them a copy of Mel Brooks' Blazing Saddles. Released in 1974, this film didn't just break the rules, it set the rulebook on fire and danced on the ashes. Today, this movie is treated like radioactive waste by the sensitivity crowd. But why? Because Mel Brooks had the courage to use raw, unfiltered language to show how absurd and stupid prejudice really is. He used the black sheriff in a racist town to make the bigots look like the idiots they were. But in the 2020s, irony is a lost art. The gatekeepers today can't distinguish between depicting something and endorsing it. Think about the legendary campfire scene, the one with the beans. It was the first time a major movie used that kind of low humor, and it was a middle finger to the polished, fake westerns of the 50s. Or consider the character of Mongo. Everything about this film was designed to offend the status quo. Mel Brooks famously said that if he tried to pitch this today, the executives would tell him, "You can't use the N-word, you can't punch a horse, you can't offend the religious groups." By the time they were done, the movie would be 10 minutes of silence. The tragedy is that Blazing Saddles actually brought people together through laughter. It was a shared experience of seeing the world's ugliness mocked with genius-level wit. Today, Hollywood would rather give us safe, sterilized, boring jokes that don't make anyone think. They've traded courage for comfort, and in doing so, they've made sure we'll never see a masterpiece like this again. Number 9. Dirty Harry, 1971. Justice without an apology. Now, let's talk about the man who redefined the American hero. In 1971, Clint Eastwood walked onto the screen as Inspector Harry Callahan, and the liberal elite in Hollywood absolutely lost their minds. The famous critic Pauline Kael called it a fascist film, but the American public, they turned it into a massive hit. Why was it so controversial? Because Harry Callahan didn't care about red tape. He didn't care about a criminal's feelings, and he certainly didn't care about the bureaucracy that protected the predators while ignoring the victims. In today's cinematic landscape, Harry would be the villain. We live in a time where heroes have to be conflicted and vulnerable. But in the early 70s, the streets of San Francisco and most of America felt like they were sliding into chaos. People wanted a man who could clean it up. Think about the iconic scene at the football stadium. Harry is standing on the leg of a serial killer, Scorpio, who has hidden a kidnapped girl. Harry is torturing him for the location. Today's directors would spend 20 minutes showing Harry crying about his moral choice. But the 1971 Harry, he just stares at the man with cold granite eyes. He does what is necessary. The modern world hates Dirty Harry because it celebrates a man who takes responsibility. It celebrates the .44 Magnum as a tool of ultimate justice. Today, the studios would insist on giving Harry a sensitivity trainer or making him apologize for his toxic masculinity. But that's why we still watch it. We watch it because we missed a time when a good man was allowed to be dangerous to the bad guys without a lawyer standing over his shoulder. Number 8. The Searchers, 1956. The Uncomfortable Truth. You might be surprised to see a movie from 1956 on this list, but John Ford's The Searchers is perhaps the most dangerous Western ever made. For decades, it was held up as the greatest movie of all time. Today, there are groups that want it removed from film schools entirely. John Wayne plays Ethan Edwards, a man filled with a dark, burning hatred. He spends 5 years searching for his niece, played by Natalie Wood, who was taken by the Comanches. But here's the part that would be banned today. Ethan doesn't want to rescue her. He wants to kill her because he believes she has been defiled by living with the tribe. Modern audiences want their heroes to be pure. They can't handle a character as complex and jagged as Ethan Edwards. They want to sanitize history, to make it look like a Hallmark card. But The Searchers is a brutal, honest look at the psychological toll of the frontier. It shows the ugly side of the American myth. If you filmed this today, the studio would force a happy, inclusive ending. They would strip away John Wayne's terrifying obsession. But it's that very obsession that makes the film a masterpiece. It's a movie about a man who has lived too long in the sun and seen too much blood. It's a raw, psychological profile of a warrior who has no place left in a peaceful world. It is too honest, too dark, and too powerful for a generation that gets offended by a shadow. Number 7. Deliverance, 1972. The Brutality of Nature. In 1972, John Borman's Deliverance took 4 city men and threw them into the green hell of the Appalachian Mountains. It was a movie that stripped away the veneer of civilization and showed exactly what happens when the modern man meets the primal, uncaring reality of the wilderness. Today, Hollywood loves to portray nature as a beautiful, spiritual place that needs our protection. But Deliverance showed nature, and the people living in its darkest corners, as something terrifying and lethal. The infamous squeal like a pig scene is one of the most harrowing moments in cinema history. Even today, it's hard to watch. In 2026, a scene depicting that kind of male-on-male sexual violence and degradation would be buried under layers of trigger warnings or, more likely, deleted entirely by a nervous studio. But the real reason this film would be banned today is its message, that when the chips are down, your education, your money, and your civilized values mean nothing. Only your will to survive and your willingness to be more violent than your attacker matters. Burt Reynolds, in his iconic leather vest with a bow in hand, became the symbol of the survivalist, a man who realized that the law doesn't exist deep in the woods. Today's films want us to wait for help. Deliverance told us that help isn't coming, and you'd better be ready to bury the bodies yourself. Number 6. Death Wish, 1974. The Vigilante's Justice. If there is one movie that represents the ultimate nightmare for modern politicians and social engineers, it is Charles Bronson's Death Wish. When it was released in 1974, New York City was a war zone. Crime was rampant, and the police were helpless. Then came Paul Kersey. Bronson played an architect, a liberal, peaceful man whose life is shattered when thugs attack his wife and daughter. When the system fails him, he buys a revolver and starts hunting. The audience in 1974 didn't just watch this movie, they cheered. People stood up in theaters and yelled for Bronson to pull the trigger. They saw their own frustration reflected on the screen. Today, a movie that suggests a private citizen should take a gun and clean up the streets is absolute heresy. Hollywood today would portray Paul Kersey as a radicalized villain or a danger to democracy. They would focus on the humanity of the muggers, but Death Wish didn't care about the muggers. It cared about the victim's right to fight back. It was a cold, hard look at a society that had lost its way, and it offered a solution that was as old as the Old Testament: an eye for an eye. In an age of soft-on-crime policies, this film is a dangerous reminder that justice doesn't always wear a badge. Number 5. Straw Dogs, 1971. A man's house is his castle. Sam Peckinpah was nicknamed Bloody Sam for a reason. He didn't film violence, he filmed poetry written in blood. But his 1971 masterpiece, Straw Dogs, is perhaps his most controversial work because it touches on the most primal nerve of all, the defense of the home. Dustin Hoffman plays David Sumner, a quiet, civilized mathematician who moves to the English countryside to avoid the violence of 1970s America. He thinks he's above it all, but the local men see his quietness as weakness. They push him, they humiliate him, and they eventually invade his home. The final 20 minutes of the film are a descent into absolute carnage as the mild-mannered professor becomes a killing machine to protect his hearth. Why would this be banned today? First, because of the extremely controversial and graphic scenes involving Hoffman's wife, played by Susan George. The film explores the dark, messy, and politically incorrect nuances of human reaction to trauma in a way that would never pass a modern sensitivity test. But more importantly, the film argues that inside every civilized man, there is a beast waiting to be awakened. It suggests that violence is a fundamental part of the male soul when his territory is threatened. Modern culture wants to medicate that instinct away, or call it toxic. Peckinpah showed it as an inevitable, even necessary explosion. When Hoffman says, "I will not allow them to come into my house," he isn't just defending a building, he's reclaiming his manhood. That is a message that 2026 Hollywood simply cannot allow. Number 4. The Wild Bunch, 1969. The Death of Honor. Sam Peckinpah again, but this time it's his magnum opus. The Wild Bunch didn't just show the end of the Old West, it showed the end of a certain kind of man. The story follows a gang of aging outlaws in 1913, men who have outlived their time in a world becoming mechanized and civilized. Why would this be banned today? Because of its unnecessary violence? No. It would be banned because it dares to show that even bad men can have a code of honor that puts modern good men to shame. The famous walk of the four outlaws toward the general's headquarters, knowing they are going to their deaths, is the ultimate cinematic statement on brotherhood and loyalty. Today's studios would try to make these men relatable or remorseful. But the bunch isn't remorseful. They are who they are. They live by the gun and they die by it. The film's opening, where children are seen torturing scorpions with ants, is a brutal metaphor for a cruel world that modern audiences would find too disturbing. In 2026, Hollywood wants heroes who are safe and sanitized. The Wild Bunch reminds us that sometimes the only thing more dangerous than a bad man is a world that has no room for any kind of man at all. Number 3. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. The Right to Be Evil. Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange was so controversial that Kubrick himself had it withdrawn from British cinemas for decades because of the copycat crimes it allegedly inspired. It is a masterpiece of ultraviolence, but that isn't why it's on this list. It would be banned today because it asks a question that 2026 culture hates. Is it better to be a forced good citizen or a free evil man? The film's protagonist, Alex, is a monster, but when the state cures him through brainwashing, the film argues that he has lost his humanity. In a world that increasingly values compliance and correct thinking above all else, Kubrick's message is a direct threat. Modern society wants to fix everyone who doesn't fit the mold. This movie argues that freedom, the real terrifying freedom of the individual, includes the freedom to be wrong. That is a philosophical bomb that today's censors would never allow to go off in a movie theater. They don't want you thinking about the price of your safety. Number 2. Gone with the Wind, 1930's Alive. Number 1. The Warriors, 1979. The Fear of the Streets. And finally, the number 1 movie that would be absolutely unthinkable in 2026, The Warriors. When this film about street gangs in New York was released in 1979, it caused actual riots. Theaters were closed, guards were hired. It was a movie that captured a raw, urban energy that terrified the establishment. Why is it number 1? Because The Warriors romanticizes the underclass. It turns street thugs into mythical heroes, like a modern-day Odyssey. In today's climate, showing gangs as organized, disciplined, and cool would be seen as an incitement to violence or glorifying criminal culture. But the real reason it's banned in the hearts of modern critics is its tribalism. It shows a world where your only protection is your colors and your brothers. There is no government help. There is no social safety net. There is only the long walk from the Bronx back to Coney Island through a city that wants you dead. It is a dark, neon-lit nightmare that celebrates the outsider. In a world that wants everyone to be a global citizen, The Warriors reminds us that sometimes all you have is the guy standing next to you. It is raw, it is stylized, and it is 100% incorrect. It is the ultimate forbidden classic. These 10 films weren't made to be safe. They weren't made to win awards for correctness. They were made to tell stories that burned with reality, humor, the good, the bad, and the ugly. When we look at the movies being made today, we see a desert of sequels and safe messages. But we still have these. We still have the grit of Bronson, the steel of Eastwood, and the wit of Mel Brooks. They can try to warn us, they can try to hide them, but they can't make us forget. So, I have to ask you, which of these films do you miss the most in today's cinema? Do you think Hollywood will ever find its courage again? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you're tired of safe movies, hit that like button and share this video with someone who remembers when cinema was real. Keep your eyes on the screen and your heart in the classics. See you in the next one.